Thank you, Mr. Wiley. You are a permanent fixture now. You are the getting everyone to pay attention. So I thank you, Pratt. Welcome, everyone. Born in Braintree, because everything comes back to Boston, the sixth president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, once said, quote, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, to become more, you are a leader." His words capture a fundamental truth about leadership, that its real measure isn't found in quarterly reports or strategic plans, but in the energy we bring to those around us. In times of uncertainty and pressure, the most vital role a leader can play is not simply to make decisions, but to enable an entire organization to rise to the challenges ahead. On behalf of Boston College and the Carroll School of Management, welcome to the Boston College Chief Executives Club. John Quincy Adams reminds us that leadership is measured not by authority, but in the ability to elevate others, to inspire people to become more than they imagined possible. At its best, leadership is about being an energy giver rather than an energy taker, instilling confidence, creating momentum, and expanding opportunity. In the sectors that shape our communities and our economy, the leaders who endure are those who lift others up and leave institutions stronger than they found them. And you are about to hear from two such individuals. Our next event will be back here at our home, the Boston Harbor Hotel, on April 23rd, when we welcome NCAA President Charlie Baker, who will be hosted by Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy. Now for today's program. Our host is John Fish, Chairman and CEO of Suffolk, a national building and innovation powerhouse that ranks among the top 25 contractors in the country with over $10 billion in annual revenue. Beyond his business success, John is a prominent national voice in policy and industry. Former chair of both the Real Estate Roundtable in Washington and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, he currently serves on the boards of the National Business Roundtable and the Partnership for New York City. Closer to home, John's impact is felt across our most vital institutions. He chairs Brigham and Women's Hospital and serves as vice chair of Mass General Brigham. He's a graduate of Bowdoin College and has been awarded honorary doctorates from several institutions, including Wentworth Institute of Technology, Regis College, and Curry College. Oh, and I almost forgot, he's also a two-time chair of the board at Boston College Board of Trustees. Our keynote speaker today is, of course, Brian Moynihan, chair and CEO of Bank of America. He leads a global team of more than 210,000 employees at Bank of America dedicated to driving economic opportunity for people and companies around the world. Under his direction, the company is consistently recognized as a global leader, appearing on the 2025 lists of Time's World's Best Companies and Fortune's Most Admired Companies. Brian's influence is felt at the highest levels of national and international commerce. He's a prominent voice in the Business Roundtable and the Financial Services Forum, and he serves as chair of the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which was founded by His Majesty King Charles III to accelerate the transition to a sustainable future. Despite this global reach, Brian remains deeply rooted in the New England community. A graduate of Brown University and the University of Notre Dame Law School, he currently serves as the Chancellor of Brown Corporation, is an active member of the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership. Please join me in welcoming two leaders who truly embody what it means to inspire others to do more and become more, John Fish and Brian Moynihan.
Brian, it's a real honor and privilege to be sharing the stage with you this afternoon. But I'd like to begin with a little story. About 25 years ago, I was sitting in a conference room in downtown Boston, and I was sitting next to one of my heroes and mentors, Chad Gifford. And Chad reached over to me and said, "John, you see that young man down at the end of that table? He's going to be sitting in my seat someday." And that young man down the end of the table is Brian Moynihan. Okay? And Brian, I just want to congratulate you. Great news to play.
Thanks, John.
Well, by way of background...
That just proves we're old, John. That's right.
By way of background, Brian was born in Marietta, Ohio. His dad was in the chemical industry, right? And you're one of 8 children, Catholic family. And I would argue that your heart really lies in Boston here, not in Ohio. He majored in history, and Brian, in his world when he was raised, sports made a great deal to him. It influenced just about everything he's done. He was a tremendous rugby player at Brown, and he met his wife, Susan, at Brown, and now they have 3 daughters, 2 daughters and 1 son. Okay? You've been at B of A now, and you've worked through probably the most transformational time in banking history. Okay? You've gone from post-financial rebuilding, the crisis we had. You've gone through the digital transformation, and now you're going through the AI revolution, which some people say is one of the most challenging revolutions that we've ever seen in our lifetime. He's became one of the most strongest, financially stable institutions in the world, and right now with over 70 million clients globally, 70 million. In addition to Bank of America, they're probably one of the most philanthropic organizations of any business in the United States of America. In community development, affordable housing, workforce housing, and very, very dedicated to climate change issues going forward. I would say when I was thinking about this discussion this afternoon, I said to myself, I've never known a person that's more selfless, disciplined, humbled, and steady leader in some of the most turbulent times. So Brian, it's a real privilege and honor to have you here. And I want to thank you for what you do for our business community and all of us here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank
The
you,
U.S.
John.
economy-
Those are great words, and you've been a great friend for a lot of years, and so that's above and beyond. So you've overachieved.
Thank you. The U.S. economy, I think, today is on everybody's mind. Over the past few years, we've experienced inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, and global conflicts at the end of the day. And recent data has showed that economic growth is slowing down a little bit, coupled with the fact that the Supreme Court ruling last week about tariffs. How do you see the strength of the U.S. economy today? Where are you watching mostly to get your information?
Sure. So we have a research team that spends a lot of time looking at economies around the world and all the different aspects of them. Their view of the U.S. economy, to stay with that, is that the U.S. in 2026 will have 2.8% GDP growth. Now, the important thing to think about with that, that's above consensus. Consensus is, say, 2.1, 2.2. The important thing to think about that is the travel over the last 12, 18 months. And the travel is actually the important thing. So if you were in December of 24, you'd have said they would have been at this kind of level, 2.5 or something like that. They would have pushed up after the election. Then Liberation Day comes and they go all the way down to about 1.5, and then they work their way back up. And that reflects the sort of certainty of business activity. And that reflects the clarity around the 3 or 4 or 5 policies that the new administration had brought to the table, which was taxes, and getting a tax act reenacted and permanent, trade tariff, immigration, and deregulation. And all those policies became very uncertain very fast, and the pace at which the change was occurring, so businesses started to sit. And importers helped back and came. And so that's why they're 2.8. And they've raised that consistently over the last 6 months. And so, and they're usually err to the side of being a little conservative. So that's the thing. But the more important thing that I look at and pay attention to is what we see the 70 million U.S. consumers do. And we see that every week. And we've seen it, I've had this data as long as I can remember being at Bank of America, still 20 plus years. So, and each week, that's credit card purchases, debit card purchases, checks written, money out of the ATMs, ACHs, wires, all the stuff. In a year, it's about $4.5 trillion. And that's up 5% the first 45 days of this year versus last year at this time. Yeah. That is very consistent with a growth in the 2.5% range or more. And there are, as you pull that apart, there are, like lower income, middle income, and upper income, just take 3/3. There are aspects of it which reflect what you hear about the K economy, et cetera, but they're all growing. And that's a piece that actually drives the economy. And the upper parts are growing faster. And this isn't a reflection on the moral policy or social policy. From sheer economics, the middle and upper drives the economic growth because they have the discretionary spending power. So it's pretty constructive. When you go to the business side, by the way, consumer credit's in good shape. Consumers are not over leveraged, and they're pretty good. And when you go to the business side, our small business customers are fairly enthusiastic, and their issue went from all the things you just traded. Interest rates rose quickly, then inflation. Then they couldn't get workers in the Great Resignation. Remember, 24 months ago, we were all talking about the Great Resignation, and now we're talking about will there be jobs and stuff. They're now, can I get employees? And so I think the key issue on their mind is labor availability because the immigration shutdown coming in. Yeah. And those in your industries, one, it's been 0% unemployment forever, so therefore it's acute. But a lot of other industries are in the same boat. So I think that's the biggest worry on their minds, but they're pretty bullish. And then the middle market reflects a little differently because they tend to have a broader base of businesses. But we're pretty constructive. In the world at 3%, more or less. China, 4.5%, which is a little lower than they'd like to be. India in the mid-6s. But it's okay, and yet there's every Pareto horribles that you and I can go through and say that this could happen and go wrong, but the reality is those horribles are the same they were 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months. Kinetic wars, the government not getting fiscal policy right, monetary policy, it's all there, but right now it's pretty constructive, and we'll see, it's been pretty.
Just a comment about that, I think sometimes people from the Northeast, our economies, I think, is a little bit slower here than other parts of the country, and if you travel quite a bit and you do business in different areas, you see it's not exactly what's going on here in Massachusetts and the surrounding communities. There's a little bit more vibrancy. Yeah. But I think the one point I want to point out to you is because of the lack of immigration policy, what we're seeing is there is a shortage of labor, and I think that's going to continue to be systemic at the end of the day.
And so as you think about the policies that as put in by the administration, the idea is they think there's an unemployed American base here that fell out of the manufacturing over the last 50 years that we've got to reemploy. And they're resolute that they want that reemployed before they'll let people in. So if you were building one of these data centers and said, there's somebody's building a factory, a specialized factory, they said I could bring people in to build it that had the technical skills to put the lines in. That's interesting, train Americans. And so that's their policy. And I'm not saying is it going to work or not. The reality is, so I think businesses are in this thing of the labor is going to have to come from retraining people and reskilling people and driving at it. And the administration is going to be tough on that.
There's no doubt in my mind about that. Well, just switching gears a little bit. Over the past several years, B of A has navigated, we talked about inflation, interest rates, geopolitical uncertainty, and rapid technological change, as we all have in our businesses at the end of the day, but still has grown substantially. Okay, over 3.5 trillion in assets, 70 million clients we spoke about, and 225,000 employees. Talk to us a little bit about the unprecedented growth and how you've been able to manage to preserve your own unique culture. And I would say, knowing Brian for quite some time and knowing quite a few of the people around the country from B of A, it is a very, very unique culture and something you should be very, very proud of.
I think there was a big cultural change for our company because our company was a series of acquisitions. So a lot of these colleagues out here used to work for us and may work for TD or other banks and stuff like that. And so, if you go back and think about it, from 2003, when Fleet Boston announced it was going to merge with Bank of America, there were 7 or 8 large transactions that went MBNA, LaSalle, Countrywide, Merrill Lynch, U.S. Trust. Think of all that. And that started Bank of America standalone before Fleet Boston was probably 100,000-ish people. Then it was about 130,000, 40,000 people. In 2007, before Merrill and Countrywide, we were about 210,000 people. We're 213,000 people today. So that's the impact of technology. But just think about that. But in that, you had this big cycle of people. So what you have to do is you have to have it clear, and we have a notion we call responsible growth. Got to grow, no excuse. Got to do it with the right risk. Got to do it on a customer-focused basis. Got to do it that's sustainable, which means we have to be the best place for teammates to work, share our success with our communities, and drive operational excellence and pay for it. The pace I rattled it off, you might think I've done that more than once, and so you have to have people thinking about that. So you have, and to be the best place for people to work, our commitment to opportunity inclusion, our commitment to personal advancement, our commitment to the benefits package, the commitment to accessing talent from places, community colleges, veterans, et cetera, that we might not otherwise find. that all helps. And so it had a great culture, the company, but it's developed through, but it's because it's gone through so many acquisitions and come out, and from 2010 to now, nothing. Yeah. 2008-9, for January 1st, we closed the last deal. So it's been a consistently run company, and for a guy who spent his life doing deals for Terry and then Chad and stuff, it was a completely foreign beast to stop cold and not do anything for all that time. But that allowed the culture to take its own shape and become, but we had to have a purpose. We're here to serve our customers. We had to have a methodology to make it simple. We have values and all this stuff, but something very simple. And then ultimately, we developed this convening thought of what you'd like the power to do, which is both a brand in the brand, but it's also in the internal brand in terms of, if I'd walked into town hall like this, I might walk around the tables, what would you like the power to do? And have people tell you what they want to accomplish. And so that then builds a culture. And you keep it going, you keep it going, you keep going. It's always hard in acquisitions to do that. We've had the luxury of not doing anything for a long time, so it's been able to you don't come to work in our company unless you believe in that. You don't stay in our company, the company spits you out. But you got to be careful that it modernizes and changes and is innovative at the same time it's solid.
Yeah. And that reminds me, as we move on, we talk about industries today are being reshaped by AI, automation, and data analytics, which all of us are really probably heavily involved in. The financial service industry is really no different at the end of the day. How has AI impacted the B of A, and how has it benefited the consumer experience, or has it not? Your question. And how do your employees respond to the AI revolution? Is it concerning to them, or do you think they're embracing it?
So the AI is an extension of automation, machine learning, and then AI, and it's a different extension. So we had Investor Day last November or whatever, and I showed people a slide, and it started in 2010 when the management team took over. We had 285,000 people. We went up to 305,000 people. We came down to 208,000 people, went back up to 218 and back down to 213. And I showed it to people, and I said, let me show you just one other set of statistics. From the 10 to 18, the consumer business, 10 to maybe 19, the consumer business went from 100,000 people to 50. The operations group went 50 to 25. Now start thinking about the math. That's 75,000 of all that. What AI does is now touches different things. So from that point, at the low point up, all the investment was technology coders, relationship managers and commercial businesses covered, and private bank and all that stuff, and other sort of front office people, and investment bankers and sales traders, stuff like that going on. What AI does is now touches a different group of people, and that's both the interesting part of it and also the difference. So our audit team, using AI, has built a set of a prompt library for auditors to do audits that they think has major savings over time. We're sales, we have 90,000 instances of Salesforce in our company to see. And so Agentforce has now been deployed, and that goes out. We have GitHub program, 18,000 coders using, saves 10%. So it affects areas, again, in 2023, you had to hire any computer programmer you could find, period, end of story. You couldn't ask the third question or else they were gone, right? And now it's like, we saved 10% and we're just learning how to use this. That difference can be reinvested heavily. But that's why it's just different. It touches areas and processes it hasn't had. The caution I'd say to people is it doesn't work unless you have your data perfectly arrayed. It doesn't work unless you understand your processes. Because if your child is writing a term paper or a paper and uses one of the OpenAI something and it messes it up and says John Quincy Adams wasn't the sixth president, he was the third president or something like that, that's a bad day. If you say transfer $100,000 to someplace and it sends it to a place you didn't want, that's the end of the client relationship. And so we have to be perfect. So this Erica that you all see out there it started in 2018. It had 200 questions it could answer, what we called insights, to 700. It handles 20 million customers a day. It has 200 million interactions a quarter, but it has to be perfect. And perfect is not necessarily just can it recognize the language. We'll come back to that in a second. Perfect is there's 110 systems behind that. And you're asking Brian Moynihan about a specific transaction. You're one of 70 million. You have all these different accounts. You're asking about one transaction of which there's 20, 30, 40 a month. And you want that one transaction, and you're driving a car at 60 miles an hour. Okay. That, if you don't get the answer, it goes haywire. You're not going to think about whether it was the 60 that your actually transmission dust was a problem. You're not going to think about that AT&T screwed up or Verizon screwed up. You're not going to think. You're just going to say it went wrong. And so that's the complexity of this idea. But Erica works today, and Erica was built because at the time there was no thing like that. And what did we mean? We had a mobile app. We have more mobile customers and blah, 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 blah. And we said, okay, it ought to be able to answer questions. So we put search in there. What's my balance? Picture of a scale, an invitation to a yoga class. We could not get the thing to answer a financial question. So we went to somebody and said, build us something that recognizes what customers say, turns it into bank speak, turns it into order, and gives them an answer. Guess what that was? A small language model. We didn't know what the hell we were talking about at the time. We knew it was natural language predictive model, but we didn't know what it stand, and that's what it was. And now this place, we know this works. 11,000 people do not work in our consumer business because of that model today.
Yeah. It's a large number.
Yeah, and so you start to think about the impact. The question is, but it's got to be perfect. The data's got to be perfect. The process has got to be understood. So the pace of this is going to be different than people think. Yeah. And then we're all going to have a capacity that we're going to have to think about. So if it helps our software engineers, are going to reinvest that capacity or not. And so there's a lot of business judgment that has to be made, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges for management over the next 5 to 10 years is how do we handle that question of capacity, taking out, building it, redeployment of people, all those things, because we never had mass layoffs to go from 285 down to 205. Yeah. We just kept letting attrition and working people. But if we don't handle it right, that's just bad for society. That's not capitalism done right. Yeah.
Just a side story. I was in India last week for 6 or 7 days, and I was just amazed at the level of enthusiasm and the excitement that they have, both for the technological revolution and the AI revolution. And then even we've gotten to meetings where people talk about the quantum revolution. I know that's going to take some time. But it just, to me, this whole issue is, it's here. It's not going to go away. I say to people in my business, you need to embrace it. It's a cultural thing. If you're not, you're probably with the wrong company at the end of the day. Because if you're worried about your job, you're not doing the right thing at the end of the day. Okay? You cannot be frightened of it. You've got to understand, it's going to continue to get more accurate, more precise, as you said, the clean data is.
But we hire 2,000 plus kids from school every year, mostly undergrads, some MBAs. We start with 200,000 applications, end up with 2,000 people, so 1%, right? So I'm sitting in front of a group in Charlotte, and I say to them, how many of you are worried about losing your job to AI? And all their hands go up. This is the most talented kids that we could accumulate, right? And there's no way that they're going to not be successful, but it's on their mind. And I think as we think about this, so our AI catalyst process we're going through is modeled after other processes we've done, but we're doing 350 to plus listening sessions literally going as we speak to have the teammates tell us what they think can get out, what they can do to make them part of the agent for change. Because if you don't do it that way, if you just say, here it is, this is the backdrop we're working against. And that's, the most talented young kids are probably all facile in it and everything else. And they're saying, I'm worried about this. And, look, in 1969, America employed 80 million people. Pretty interesting time, those of us around in 1969. Within years, you had Nixon, Watergate, Kent State. In 68, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King killed. You just think of all the things, but also think about the computer change from the mid-60s to now. Think about the difference. It was just the infancy. You had no phones, you had no laptops, you had no even desktops. In 2019, 50 years later, guess how many people America employed? 160 million. So all that change, and the great business guru Peter Drucker wrote, at the time of the advent of computer, there's no reason to have managers in the company anymore because we were just transmitting information. We have 20,000 managers at Bank of America today, so he wasn't right. But the spirit of it was that this will change, the computer would change the way information. You don't need to have manager interpret information or bring information. So the glass half full is, think of all the unrest in the world, and we lost all the manufacturing to Japan in the 60s and 70s, and they were going to take over the world, and all the things that were talked about, and here we are later. that's the glass half full. The glass half empty is you get people writing a report that circulated the other day that, we're going to have Armageddon in 2 years, and then they retract and say, well, that's not what we meant, but we'll see. But I think our job as stewards of people, capitalism, business done right, is to make sure this works right for the employees and for our customers.
I appreciate your leadership with the conversation too. It takes people like Brian, who's very, very well known globally, to speak about AI and really settle people down in a very, very thoughtful way.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you. And to switch gears a little bit to small and mid-sized businesses. We know, and you speak about quite eloquently, the backbone of our economy here. Yeah. Mind. What are you seeing from small businesses in 2026, and how is BofA supporting their growth, which you've always had over the years? How do you see that going forward?
So we have. We're the largest small business lender in the country, and we operate in all the markets around the country. And so what we hear from, and we survey them, and they talk about it. And as I said before, they kind of went from, over the last 24 months, from overregulation and inflation and things like that. Then they moved into an enthusiasm place, and then the trade and tariffs threw them for a loop. But now they're down, they're really focused on this question of getting employees, retraining employees, and then harnessing technology, because the AI affects businesses which would heretofore not been thought through. So, not thought to be affected by it. That might be a better statement. And so they're in pretty good shape. Our job, we formed in this, on my wall in my office, I have the prospectus to raise the money for the Massachusetts Bank. And the phrase is, we studied other nations. This is 1784. So the Treaty of Paris is 1783. The war ends. America has now become an independent country. And what does it need? It's been cut off from the mother country, so it needs to grow. So they formed a bank here in Massachusetts. In the prospectus says, we studied the other nations. You have to have a banking system to stop capital flight and to support proprietors, take deposits and keep them safe, and relend them at interest to other people. That's what banks do. And if you think about our small business practice around the country, or our middle market practice, that's what we do. We take deposits in from all the people who have excess money, and we turn around and make sure it has the capital to grow, and that's what banks are for. So it's a great practice. They feel good, the credit quality is good, everything's fine. As long as the American consumer keeps spending money, they should be fine. But they have all, they don't have the staffs that some of us have that can analyze, so they get confused when there's uncertainty. And that caused them to get quiet. And they were kind of hit a place of understanding as we came through the end of the year. And then all this with the recent Supreme Court will cause them to start to rethink what's happening. Because do you know how to price through something which may or may not be there? And if you're an importer, or import all your goods and sell them, or you import part of your goods, or you import, it's tough to figure out right now. Yeah.
One thing about the small business, I think we often talk about in the 2026 year, is the American dream alive? I think the idea of having the opportunity to think about creating a small business to a medium-sized business. A lot of us in this room have had that opportunity and have succeeded in a very positive way. Some of us have failed. I often say you learn more from failure than do successes. But I think having banks like Brian's bank support small, medium-sized business is at the core of what we do. And also, when you're doing that, you're going by your gut a lot at the end of the day. You look at the data analytics, but you look at somebody across the table. Can he or she really perform the way they're talking about?
No, but it's not me going by my gut, because it's having the talent in all those markets, that are out meeting the clients and seeing them, and that's the nature of banking. And my colleagues from other banks, that's what we do. We go out and meet them. We make judgments. This is one of the reasons why some of these capital markets-driven executions, the private credit, and it hasn't gotten to small business, but it's gotten into the market. And one of the points I've always made about it is, if the bump in the road happens, will a person who doesn't really know the company for 30, 40 years and been with the company 20 years or 10 years even, have the patience to wait through and work through it? And by the way, will they even have the resources? And so that's, when private credit first became popular in like 17, 18, 19, and most of the people in this room would have never heard of it and thought about it. I said to Jay, that's the interesting question. Will the workout process be the same when it's 4 people who bought the credit from a third party and don't really have an interest in trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong, who can give you a business plan and stick to it? And I think every there are very few customers who just go straight up. You know, everybody has a bump in the road. Everybody has a business plan redoing, and a good commercial banker, of which we are blessed to have a lot of them, will sit there and say, I understand when you're BSing me, and I understand when you have a chance, and if you commit to a strategy, we'll work through the other side of it. I'm not sure that the capital markets or people have that temperament, and the question is how that affects the economy is something that's on my mind.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the community a little bit. B of A nationally and globally has been very, very committed to local communities, and you've invested a lot of capital in those areas. And the question is, how do you deploy that? How do you decide what capital to deploy? But I know some areas like affordable housing, which is a huge thing, because we're probably 7 million units short in America today. How do you take a look at that investment in the community, and why is that so important to your culture as a bank?
So as we look at it, we have our charitable work, which is $300+ million a year, pure charity. But something like affordable housing is a business and for a purpose. So when you think about how we actually affect the economy and affect things getting done, the private sector has a resource to do it. The banking system has a resource to help our good clients do it. They've got to do it. We're helping them. But you don't want just our charity. You want our whole balance sheet. And this is how we think about an energy transition. We finance oil and gas companies because we need a lot of power, and we finance the data center build-outs. We also finance a lot of renewable energy because we need to shape that over time and reduce emissions. And so, but we got to, if we can do it on a profit-taking basis, it then can sustain. So you have to think about the different things. So on the pure charity work, we focused a lot of different ways over the years, but housing has been. We do about $5 billion of financing of affordable housing every year. It just keeps going along despite all the noise and thought. Do we need more of it? Yeah. You and I have studied this market in New York and Charlotte. There's just a need for more of this housing, and we've got to get people to understand that that's a permitting question. That is a financing question. And it's also a will question. And you see the communities are pretty good at it. They can, because they have the will, they'll create the permitting and the other things will allow it to fall in place. The developers will come because if it can be built with a reasonable thing, they'll come.
Be there 100%.
They'll come. It's a question that's things. So as we looked at it, so we've done that. And then, we do the arts, the Museums on Us program, which has been, it's now 300 countries, 300 museums around the country and around the world. We do the Sports with Us, which is part charity, part brand, and with the World Cup sponsorship, and the Golf with Us, which is built off the idea of a kid between 5 and 16 being able to join play golf for $5 around 2,500 munis, 86,000 kids. We started with a Masters Augusta National relationship last year. We think about all these things to help us, our job, workforce development. We put $40 million into workforce development last year. Some benefits us, but most of it benefits the work we've done with MACP, the work we've done with the CLC in Charlotte, the work we've done with the partnership in New York and Atlanta Executive Chamber of the Council. You're trying to get employers to work together. You're trying to get employers to work together to help bring people into our, frankly, the big companies, because even if they left us someday, they went to work for another construction company. They're well trained. They've had a great start. They understand it. They'll be more successful than if they don't do that. And so we do a lot there. So we look at it, but we look at it as a way to support our communities. Because at the end of the day, if our community is strong, we're strong. And then we think about what that community needs. And Me Hall here in Boston, it has 97 of Me Halls around the country, and every place you go. And I talk to them once a month, and it's them thinking about their communities. So in the LA fires, Raul and I help lead with the government how to think about the rebuilding things, and we've given him a lot of insight. And he chairs one of the committees, whether it's the floods in Western North Carolina. The team there helps rebuild that. So it's a fabulous thing. And then 2.5 million volunteer hours. So our headcount's down from 300,000, 200,000, make it simple, and our volunteer hours went up. And so we do the teammates do 2.5 million a year. So that's important because it's a chance for them to do good stuff. So,
Interesting about you talked about investing, and you talked about some of the sports activities you've invested in, as well as I think we're all coming off a real high of the women's team winning the gold and the men's team hockey winning the gold as well too. And I think that was inspirational. I remember, I'll date myself. I remember back in 1980 when the Americans won. Back then I was in college at Bowdoin in Brunswick, Maine, and sitting in a living room with my roommates and seeing what happened on Sunday morning. It's that same feeling came back in. I hope that's an inspiration to our country. And I think what's happened is I think the 2026 Milan Olympics, I think, sparked a lot of interest in sport. And I know B of A has made significant investments in sports partnerships. And whether it be the Olympics, FIFA, Boston Marathon for many, many years, okay, and a whole bunch of other community local programs to help young kids. How is B of A's leveraging sports partnerships driven sort of your brand and your desire to show up in the community and how you show up in the community?
So our traditional relationship with sports largely was around the work we do with the Patriots, for example, and the teams and the teams and the team charities and the building the facilities, and that was more the traditional role in our team. We've had a great capability to help people finance teams and finance buying of teams and finance different structures, and also help build facilities in the Bank of America Stadium, and we work with the Yankees on a lot of stuff. So
it's a bad word, by the way, right?
Yeah, we work with the Red Sox a lot too.
There you go.
And so, you go around the country. I have to be careful because remember, I have to be above it. So I'm a Patriots fan. I went to the Super Bowl, and and it was not a great outcome, but an unbelievably great season for us. So. I can be partial then, but sometimes I have to maintain impartiality, at least on financing. But I think what switched us a bit ago was thinking about the participatory nature of sports. So the Chicago Marathon is our asset, so don't think of this as a sponsorship. We actually run this thing for a long time, 30 plus years. Literally, our employees run the marathon. So Jack and the BAA, the fabulous asset that we have here, we are that in Chicago, and it's great. And so we've done that for years, and we've been thinking about it. And then Jack and the team had a change from Hancock to us. The sponsorship came up and we took it. But when David Tyree was here, worked with Jack closely, I said, when we take it, we got to change the nature of this thing. We got to try to drive the charity to places it's never been. So working with Jack and the team, we did something that we hadn't done for Chicago, honestly, because we hadn't thought of the scale until we did it, that this is my marathon campaign. And so not only did we increase the charity for the BAA and the thing, we doubled Chicago at the same time. So these are $500 million economic impact things to our communities, bring people from all over the world to run in iconic races that are on the, and yes, there's some 0.5% that are going to run that 2-hour marathon. The rest of us are going to run 4 hours, 3 hours, and the question is, why are we running? And so David and his team were able to pull in this idea of my marathon. We put it on national TV, and that changed the nature of the thing. So the teammate of ours has run, what he's run, like 140 marathons now, pushing somebody. Told the story of why he runs. The woman who ran for breast cancer. The fellow that runs for Christopher Reeves that was paralyzed and came. These commercials then just generated this huge interest in up like that, right? And so we said, that's kind of interesting. So we started playing around with the different ideas, and we said, we can do this. So then our FIFA sponsorship is a lot about, look, FIFA, it's football, but I told people we couldn't talk about football in America until the Super Bowl was over, or the college playoffs were over, because it was like, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. So we had to let that pass. But our goal with the FIFA work, and what I said to Gianni when I met him the first time, was we can democratize this. We can bring it out differently to the communities we serve. And we can work with your other partners. So the fields we're doing in these communities that are, there are dirt fields that are there, but now are turf fields and will have duration and not have the maintenance requirements. That working with David Beckham now, helping think about that excellence level. What's unique about sport, team sport, is individual excellence. At the goalie, individual unbelievable excellence, but in a team concept. And we think that's a critical value for all of us learned, and we got to make sure kids learn. So we thought about that. So we said if FIFA will bring it out. So we'd never really taken on that since the Olympics in '96. Probably hadn't taken on that big a sponsorship position, and we took that on, and we have been democratizing it. And then with golf, what we said is we did the Latin America and Asian amateur, and when the women's amateur came up in Augusta, I could see what Fred and the team, it was actually Billy at the time and Fred, were trying to do, and I said, let us try to help you. So the ads were all about young lady empowerment. It had nothing to do with golf. Yeah. It just happened to have a golf ball bouncing around the desk. And so we said, this is something interesting. So that has become the #1 women's amateur tournament in the world. And then the championship came up, and we said, we got to think of something other than here's Amen Corner, our brand. That's where we came up with Golf With Us. And now, in respect, Stan Finucane came up with museums with us 30 years ago. We aren't that inventive. We just said, let's do Golf With Us, and here we did. And so it took off, 86,000 kids in a short period of time, and we'll drive that up again. We've overwhelmed the capacity. Now we're working with some other people to kind of pick up at the mentor stage. 13-year, 14-year-old kids quit playing. So the first tee we work with, then you have this program, and then what happens is 13, 14, they need somebody to play with. Got a bunch of people our age to go out and play with them, retirees and things like that. And 30%, 35% are young women, I think, David. And so we're seeing that, and we think but these are kids that wouldn't otherwise get the chance to play. So it's that democratization. Now golf's an individual discipline, but we're having these athletes that run the clinics. And not athletes or golfers, just athletes, and they just love it. And so we're trying to get these kids to say the discipline of practice, a discipline of success in doing it. They will not all be on the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour. Believe me, it's just never going to happen that way. It's such a narrow funnel. But on the other hand, they're going to learn life sport and do it. So we try to think of how we democratize, how we build the sport, and the brand falls out of that. Because we got brand recognition. You can't, sometimes more than you want, but we got plenty of brand recognition. What we need is people to see how we can create value for the brand. And that's work with Jack here, work with teammates in Chicago, and then we picked up the Great Ethiopia race. So why would you pick up that? 70,000 people go to this race. It is a circus. Jack went over last year. It is wild. It is a party event. It's only 10K, so anybody can do it. There's kids. We picked up on this notion that A, we can maybe bring the charity aspect to it that it hasn't had. And B, the great runners that come from all over Africa that win these races, you want to give them a connection point. Yeah. And so we're trying to think of how that works. But if we can take Africa-based charities that we've worked with, RED, Every Mother Counts, and Water.org, and with Matt Damon, and think about how to raise money around this African iconic race, that's kind of interesting to us. So we're thinking that through.
Just one comment, then open up to questions. As you sit here and you listen to Brian's comments, the level of sincerity and heartfeltness that he offers his comments to about the individual, the community, and the country, it speaks volumes for why Bank of America is so successful. I just want to editorialize that a little bit for you. But maybe we can open up the comments for questions for the audience, if you don't mind. And I know Warren's got a microphone. Right here, Warren.
There.
Brian, you talk about the growth and the operationalization that you've had at Bank of America, whether that's opportunities for people to work from home and lose commute time or artificial intelligence. But how do you think about that, both as an organization and personally, right? You referenced Mr. Gifford, Mr. Murray, and people that have been great mentors. How do you think about balancing that with developing talent and developing the next pipeline of leaders for Bank of America?
So everything's a process. And so we try to build talent management processes to drive through the organization. So twice a year, I go, my direct reports in 2 levels below it. We look across all that. We identify talent, and then we put them in a series of special programs to develop them. Over the years, we've done a lot of work on that. We've gotten better at it. We've gotten worse at it. We got better again at it. It ebbs and flows. But a while at the top of the house, I was sitting at actually a business council, which is going on, I think, tomorrow, and I was looking around, and there was Maggie Welterod was there, and Denise Morrison, and I'm looking, they're all retiring. And I said, I got an idea. So I went to them and said, would you come help me? We'll take at that point it was only women, we'll take the top women in the company, and you get a bunch of CEOs, and we'll mentor them 10 to 1. And so we've done this now for 6-7 years. Now it's open to everybody. So we took CEOs to talk to our teammates who are a level below our direct reports on a constant mentoring basis. We run all the KSRs and all the different 360 KSR, blah, 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 and all that stuff. But this was a chance for them to have a personal mentor, which has been a unique program, been very interesting to see the relationship develops between the people and what they can do. But it's just a process. So we think about, skills and matching and all the stuff you have to think about at the first, second, third level. We have different management training programs starting, and we differentiate them by level of manager. So manager of individual contributors, and then the next big step as a manager, you're removed. And then it goes through the things Ram Charan, who's written about the terms of management and stuff like that, we built this program thinking about how do you train. So we look at talent, we look at inspection, and then individual mentoring has not been a big practice at Bank of America. This CEO group has been individual mentor. Not that it doesn't happen informally all over the place. The challenge I always thought in that, it wasn't programmatic. And it's not just wrong. I benefit a lot by whether it was Terry or whether it was Chad or whether it was Jay or whether it was Ken Lewis or whether it was other people. I learned from all these people and inside and outside. And I was lucky to have a lot of people. But I think that I just have thought about it more programmatically because one mentor is one set of interest and facts. What you want someone to do is see lots of people and think about lots of different questions. Then as they get to the CEO level, what I'm trying to do is, can they see the trade-offs that you have to make when you're at the top management team? Not just the CEO, but the top management team, because you have to have only one interest at heart then is the whole company. So when you leave that line of business, managing division X, unit Y, and cross over, that is a huge step psychologically. And saying, I therefore have to make sure that the whole company benefits by everything I do, and my individual success is subordinate no matter what, or else you will get spit out by your rest of your teammates. And so, and then think about the trade-offs. Our trade-offs are not obvious. We got regulatory issues, we got political issues, we got culture issues, we got this. It's not as obvious as, we can make more money doing this or not doing that, or the risk is that clear. Those are easy trade-offs. Not easy, but they're obvious things you have to make trade-offs about. It's not so obvious you have to make it about how you might use the brand in certain cases, what you can affiliate with, what you can't. And so you're trying to just give people the psychology of how to think about it. Not that you're going to make the answer for them because they're going to face different circumstances, but how to think about the question. And that's what I think I benefited a lot from early in my career is I could watch very senior people think through issues. And as I was a lawyer, I advised them, and as a practitioner, I worked with them. But when you saw them think it through, that's the judgment. And I think that's the AI-proof aspect of the human being that will be a long time till we get there.
One last question.
Hey Brian, my name is Sheetal and I am with Accenture Financial Services, and I'm right now working for a retirement services client. You mentioned about this economy being growing and constructive, but with AI changing a lot of things and in general a lot of, how should I say this, tumultuous times here, how do you think retirement planning should be done, or how are firms looking at retirement planning, like for all generations, people in their 30s, 50s?
Yeah, I don't think. If the question is, should people plan differently based on AI's impact? At the end of the day, I don't think so, because the near-term impact of this, will be something, and over time it'll be a lot maybe, but you'll be working on it. So I wouldn't. At the end of the day, the key thing that we try to make sure that our affordability of all our products and services, but then also the financial planning part of it, for the starter, is you got to cash flow positive. That's the first question. And then you got to save part of that cash flow. That is something that's not taught in school anymore. And so getting people to understand, customers to understand that and think about that. And then once you start doing it, then the question is, how do I save it and how do I invest it and what's the duration and what's my time frame? Those are all personal questions based on personal circumstances. And we have a thing called Life Plans, which 7 million people use every day to help them plan that. And we have a tremendous team at Merrill and the private bank to help you do that, and the FSAs and the branch and Merrill Edge. But it's really getting people with a view that they're going to make sure they manage to get the and that means they've got to be. You can either increase your top line, or you can keep your expense in a range that your top line works. It's a personal choice for that, but you're trying to get our customers to think that through, and then to use debt strategically to get the things they need, but make sure it's manageable, because there's nothing more disruptive. And in retirement, it's really use your 401k. The employee match is basically a bonus, right? You put 7 in our company, you get 7. You get a 7% increase. Don't work for a company forever, you divest after whatever year, whatever it is. That's a bonus. Why would you never take advantage of that? So you got to get these basic things. So we have a employee investment program and other programs at work to help employers think about how to educate their teams on that. But I don't think will AI change the employment prospects of people? The answer will be up to the person, honestly. It's what John mentioned. which is if you were graduating from college 5 years ago and we said, and you're going to work in a business like ours, don't learn Excel. It's not worthwhile. You'd say, wait a second, it's a base, or don't learn accounting. Accounting is a language of business. If you don't understand it, look at my friend from KPMG. Yeah. you don't understand it, you don't. So this is just a tool you got to master. Now, if you get to singularity or reasoning, learning past the point, it may have an impact that we haven't thought through yet and be more intrusive. But if you can't harness it, make it work for you. And then we believe firmly you have to have a human in the loop on a lot of stuff. So even when Erica loads the call center agent with what you could do yourself, when it loads that call center, you have to have somebody look at it because it can be wrong. That may change someday as it gets better and better, but that'll just lessen the human content. But also ought to make us potentially more productive. And that's why I go back and think of that longer-term question of 69 to 19. I don't want to be Pollyanna. I don't want to say to people, don't prepare. But if you harness this, this country can own this.
Brian, thank you very much for a lovely conversation.